Hi, I'm Dr. David Dobson. Welcome to Conversations. Today, my guest is Dr. Tanya Staples, who has recently defended her PhD dissertation in personal financial planning from Kansas State University. Today, we will discuss her research, which explores gender differences in retirement preparedness behavior in Canada using the health belief model. Tanya, it's a pleasure to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Why were you interested in studying this research topic for your PhD?
Well, it's interesting you ask me that because I think I must admit I think I have been driven to this topic for a very long time, even before I even thought about doing my PhD, which is about 7, 8 years ago now. And I think as a woman in Canada, certified financial planner, practiced for 20 years. I think it was just something that I always, in the back of my mind, wondered about. And so, are there differences? What motivates Canadians? What potentially acts as a barrier or limits Canadians from engaging? And I really wanted to know whether or not men and women were different,
Mm,
or did they react different or respond different to the things that I was going to test? So I think it's been with me a long time, actually.
wonderful. Tanya, your research has never been done in Canada. What gap in Canadian financial research does your dissertation address?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think when we look at the research I did, I used the Canadian Financial Capability Study, which has been around, done every 5 years since 2009, and so that study, that information is there, but there had been no kind of large scale gender sensitive study on retirement preparedness behaviors, specifically using Canadian household data. Lots of stuff in the U.S. And in particular from a health belief model. And so that is a different approach. It's not a typical or traditional theoretical framework that we see when we look at financial planning. But I think one of the reasons that I thought it was so valuable is because of the perceived barriers and benefits and threats together. And I really thought that that would be an interesting, different approach because I do think there's a connection between health and finance, and that I think we often approach those, um, or at least the threat of a health issue, the threat of a financial issue. I wonder if we potentially approach those the same way. And so that might be a future study.
For sure. So I want to follow up on the health belief model. How does the health belief model, usually used for public health, apply to financial goal like retirement preparedness?
Well, and so I think the key part there is looking at the health belief model or the framework from the perspective that it is a predictive model, right? And so I think it maps really neatly onto financial behaviors, particularly retirement planning or preparedness, because by engaging those activities, you are preventing yourself from not being prepared, right? Which is exactly what we want. And I think the core constructs within the health belief model, the perceived barriers, the perceived threats, the perceived benefits, cues to action, self-efficacy that I didn't specifically look at, but also are part of that framework. It helps to explain why people either act or don't act, and whether they are likely or not likely to engage. And I think because we know we want people, Canadians, to engage in retirement preparedness, I think practitioners can use that as a tool going forward.
Mhm,
A woman's life is quite different than a man's life,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
Women have disrupted life course work patterns. There is a gender pay
mhm,
gap that we're aware of. There are factors around longevity, so women tend to live longer than men. And so I think we really needed to look at it, knowing that those structural barriers exist. Are there things that we could use from an engagement perspective, from a practitioner perspective, that could help women engage better, and be able to overcome some of those structural barriers that are going to take much more than practitioners to solve.
Given women face unique financial challenges, as you mentioned, how do you reconcile this growing financial power with continued financial insecurity for Canadian women?
So that is definitely an interesting one. And so I think any attempt to reconcile those two is going to take a while. And I'm not sure it's something that just practitioners can do by themselves. I actually think that there's a much bigger policy role at the government level. But at least for a period of time, this increase in wealth and this financial insecurity, they're going to coexist, right, for a while. And so when we compare men to women, men have historically had more assets. Now women will have more assets. And if we can get planners to add more value that uniquely understand how women want to plan, the needs of their women clients, and how those relationships differ from those of men, I think we can add a lot of value to our female clients. And if we think about even in other industries, a lot of research around healthcare has focused on the health of men. Now we're recognizing that the health of women is different. And so if we begin to apply that to the financial health of women, I think we'll begin to see some of those nuanced differences and also then bring women into that discussion more, so that we actually understand their planning principles and the things that they value as clients, supporting them in this big wealth transfer.
Tanya, what was the most significant gender-specific barrier to retirement preparedness that your study identified?
So we looked at indebtedness, lack of emergency funding, poor credit, and lack of financial control. And so unfortunately, there wasn't anything that was really strongly statistically significant from a gender perspective between men and women. But we did see that both indebtedness and lack of emergency funding were very strong for both men and women. These really acted as barriers that limited engagement. And where we did see a gender difference, but not so much relating to any specific barrier or benefit, was around formal education. And so, David, I do need to look at this in greater detail, because we do know that women lean into formal education. There's a positive relationship between formal education and retirement preparedness behaviors. And so I think this could be quite a driver for future planning. But around a barrier perspective, it negatively affected both men and women quite significantly.
Very interesting. What did your research identify as the most effective psychological motivator or perceived benefit that successfully drives women to prepare for retirement?
So this was an interesting one. We looked at a bunch of different factors that have been recognized as benefits, perceived or otherwise. And women demonstrated higher odds than men in the areas of retirement confidence. So if they were feeling retirement confident, greater engagement in retirement preparedness behaviors. If they stayed informed of financial matters, that also had a positive relationship with retirement preparedness engagement. Being goal-oriented, so consciously thinking about future goals, that also was positive. And then keeping track of money. So the ins and outs on a daily or monthly, weekly time frame were also considered to be very valuable for women. And so it is interesting to see that there was a difference there. Even if it was statistically significant for both, we saw greater odds for women in this area.
You also suggest that men and women do not differ that much. In what specific area of retirement preparedness did you find the least amount of gender difference?
So that's there's been a bit of research in this area. The smallest gender gap, or at least gender awareness, was really around seeking and accepting financial advice. So very little. We looked at 5 in total. So we looked at, do you have a retirement account? Have you calculated retirement need? Are you actively saving for retirement? And then other topics around advice seeking have also been positively associated with retirement preparedness. And those were the two smaller areas, or where there wasn't as much difference between men and women. There is a little bit of research out there that says there might be some differences around the trust piece, but that wasn't evident in the research that I conducted.
Mm. Uh, Based on your own experience as a financial planner, do you see that Canadians are really prepared for their retirement?
So no, no, I don't see that they're prepared for retirement. I think if we look at the fact that I think it's only somewhere between 30 and 40% of Canadians that have a financial plan. We know calculating a future retirement need is critical. Very few Canadians calculate a future retirement need. So if you aren't aware what you might need, it's very difficult to plan for that amount, right? And so there's a disconnect there. We know there's been lots of research that says Canadians are generally worried about their financial futures going forward. I just read the other day that more and more Canadians are using reverse mortgages to support their retirement lifestyles. And so I think they're not prepared. And I think we need to really continue to help get that message out, help build the confidence of Canadians too, so that they feel like they have the ability to be prepared, because I think that's critical.
Mm. And do you think it's maybe because of lack of financial literacy?
I think it's two. I think it's a
Mm,
lack of financial literacy. I also think it's a lack of financial self-efficacy, right?
mm,
So financial self-efficacy is, do we have the
mm,
confidence
mm,
that we can do what's needed to be
mm,
done to be successful in our own
mm,
retirements? And so I
mm,
think there's that as well. There's some existing research by colleagues of mine, Doctors Acevedo and C. They have done some research on the relationship between retirement planning and financial self-efficacy. Stir et al. In 2021, they also looked at financial self-efficacy. And so I think where that woman piece comes back into the picture, though, is that research often suggests that women have lower levels of financial self-efficacy. And so if women aren't feeling as confident, we know that there's a lower likelihood of engagement.
mm,
And so that could also be part of this puzzle, because I think it plays a critical role. And I think as advisors, we need to really support that when we're dealing with our female or women clients.
mm. I just want to go back to this financial self-efficacy. So we know that it's crucial in overcoming these barriers. So what's the fastest way a financial planner can help a client build it?
Oh, the $1 million question you might just have asked. I think it is a conscious effort, right?
Mm,
And so
mm,
what I mean by that is, and I'm not sure if you have heard this statistic, but there is a statistic in North America that says that in the event that a woman spouse, her spouse dies, or she is left alone, about 85% of women will move their assets within 18 months of the death or the loss of a spouse. And so there's got to be a disconnect there, right? I mean, that there need obviously more research again, but there's got to be a disconnect there. And so I think there is the possibility that we aren't hearing women. We aren't connecting with women clients as well. There is some research to suggest that women have deferred the financial decision making to their spouse. In the research that I looked at, more men than women were engaged in the day-to-day financial decision making. And so I think there's quite a few factors at play there. But I think if we actively listen to our clients, I think if we support them in their desire to learn more, because remember, we know that formal education is important to women. So in supporting them in their desire to become more financially literate, helping them develop the confidence to make the required financial decision making. And then I think we can do that by creating some agency and ownership as well, David.
Mm.
in that process, allowing women to own those decisions and allowing women to feel confident about the decisions, I think that could go a long way to support some of the barriers that we see in this lack of self-efficacy.
Your final point is, how do we support women better? What is the one most important recommendation for financial professionals to take from your dissertation?
Oh, the most important point. I'm not sure if it's, David, I'm not sure if it's different
Mm,
from listening to women, right?
mm,
Hearing
mm,
them, giving them a place at the table,
mm,
actively engaging in the process, right? The
mm,
more we get women involved in the financial decision making, helping them get more money set aside, not simply engaging in the process on an ad hoc basis, very involved, even strategically within a household. Are we, contributing equally to each of the spouses? Are we making sure we're taking advantage of, TFSAs and spousal RSPs and ensuring that those values are equal? Or fair, whatever depends on longevity. Equal might not be the right situation. I think when we give that advice to practitioners, it is really about getting women more involved in the financial decision making process and meeting them where they're at.
So, Tanya, if you have a one piece of advice to women, what that advice would be, especially when it comes to the financial preparedness?
Well, and so, you know what, that's a great point. So, one of the things we did see when we looked at when I looked at
Mm,
those five retirement preparedness behaviors,
mm,
more women than men, 20% actually of the entire survey, were engaged in only one or zero retirement preparedness behavior. And
mm,
so, if you're not engaged in the process, you're never going to be retirement prepared. Like that's just the reality. You're just not. And so understanding that that preparedness requires you to be actively involved. And so if I was going to give one piece of advice to women, become actively involved in planning for your future self. And one of the things too about planning is often when we think about the future, it seems very far, right? It seems very distant from us. And it seems like something we're, a long time from now, we're going to end up being. Whereas if we think about how would our future self like to spend money, we create almost an association between our current self and our future self, and it makes it seem more practical. And so making that very practical connection for women, I think could be very valuable as well.
mm. Tanya, as both a professional financial planner and a professor, how does your academic research directly change the way you teach the next generation of financial planners?
This is such a great topic. And so when I came into industry 13 years ago from a teaching perspective, right? So I came into the academic profession. It was way much more about getting the technical knowledge into my students, right? What did they need to know to really make the numbers work? And I can say very both consciously on my part, and then I think almost subconsciously, because I think the profession of financial planning has changed so much from being very transaction product oriented to much more now holistic, comprehensive, client focused financial planning. The psychological behavioral aspect of financial planning has become critically important. And so, not only assessing the quantitative needs, but the qualitative needs of our client and how those qualitative factors will drive the client's financial decision making. In my classroom, we spend a lot more time on thinking about how we're going to support clients in those kind of micro task decision making or these behavioral nudges that will move them in the right direction and possibly help them survive some of these life interruptions that we know happen to everyone at some point in some time. And then we also have, given that it's an applied degree that I teach into, we've got industry role play. Students are constantly engaged in case study analysis, and that helps bring some of that experiential learning that they often don't get in a kind of typical classroom lecture theoretical setting.
What is the next big question for the field of financial planning that your research has now opened up for future study?
So I think where I find great interest in this is that it shows that this kind of life course,
Mm,
these disruptions, these perceived barriers, have driven kind of a lot of women's what I would call under preparedness. And so I think if we can move kind of from a description to solution perspective, and also I think what we want to look at is how do we really practically design plans to help them achieve those goals and manage those disruptions. I mean, I think we know caregiving does tend to affect women more, whether it be caring for our own children, or if it's that women are often the default caregiver for elderly and aging parents also. And so that makes it different or difficult. And then again, continuing to support the wealth gap and the pension gap that exists. Helping and suggesting and even just advocating for our clients so we can see some of that policy change. I think these are all continued areas that we need to look at from a research perspective to ensure that we can support our women clients. I mean, many women clients may spend 40 years in retirement. That's a very, very
mm,
long time.
yeah. Tanya, now you have defended your PhD. What is next for you?
Oh my goodness. I have given myself a month to try and not really think about anything. I do have a lot of research I'd like to publish. So,
Mm,
projects that
mm,
I pushed to the back burner kind of in
mm,
this last
mm,
6 month push
mm,
to finish up my dissertation. I do know that my dissertation was quite lengthy, so I'm going to break that up into smaller,
mm,
publishable parts.
mm,
I am working on some interesting work around financial infidelity.
mm,
So that is another area of some research that I've using the fraud paradigm. I'm going to research that a little bit more, and then I actually have some raw data on financial planners, women financial planners in Canada, and the barriers that they face to advance throughout the profession. Similar research was done in the US in 2014 by the CFP board and the WIN study. And so I wanted to look at what was limiting women because the percentage of women who are certified financial planners in Canada has been pretty stagnant for a
mm,
long time. Yet this is a career from my perspective that's ideally suited to women. It's, you deal with money, you're helping people, it's flexible. You can truly feel like you're adding value to people. And those things all resonate with women, and the compensation is quite good. And so I
mm.
think all of that is going to be things that I'm going to focus on. And then I've got a couple pet projects as well. I am working on, an academic journal, and I belong and are sorry, I'm a board member on a couple different national boards, where I get to feel like I give back and to continue to support financial planning access to all Canadians, regardless of how much wealth they have.
Wonderful. Tanya, thank you so much for sharing your interesting research with us. We wish you all the best in the continued work.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Dobson. I've really enjoyed it. Appreciate your time as well.